in the Constitution, here's all in your support of domestic. I don't recall there being an expiration date on that. He is a free American, claimed That's the Green American, weekdays at 7 a.m. Pacific, 10 a.m. Eastern. Every time I think about it, for the podcast and more details, visit www.freeamerican.com or catch the podcast by phone by calling 832-999-8621. Hey, Clayton?
Yes, sir. Do you want to do it on the other number?
I am ready on Skype.
All right, I'll call you right back on that. I'll call you right back on that.
Okay, great. Hello?
All right. I got you, and we're rolling, and everything's working now. except for me. I had you. I think I had something screwed up here. So anyway, it's okay. You're here, and I'm here, and everything's working. I just got to make a few changes on the internet here, and it's running kind of slow. Dan, give me a little bit of history here, since I don't have since everything I got isn't working properly for the moment. Who are you? What are you doing? And what's wrong with this country?
Oh boy, that's a tall order. My name is Dan Johnson. I am the founder and national director of People Against the NDAA, or PANDA. My long downward spiral into politics started back in fall 2011. I came across a video of the National Defense Authorization Act, and I grew up studying Nazi Germany. I grew up studying the rise and fall of the Third Reich, rise and fall of Imperial Japan. I was homeschooled, so I was allowed to pretty much think clearly as a person. And I remember watching that video. It's called 63 Senators Betrayed You Today. I remember watching that video. I remember them drawing the parallels between what happened in 1933 Germany and today, what's happened in 2012, National Defense Authorization Act. And I was stunned. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. I mean, it was like having an epiphany, just watching that video and going, "You got to be kidding me! Absolutely got to be kidding me!" And you know, if you look at the Reichstag fire decree passed in 1933 by Hitler's and his team at the Reichstag, and you look at the parts of the original Weimar Constitution that it violates, then you take the U.S. Constitution, you take the Patriot Act, and take the NDAA, and look at the parts of the U.S. Constitution that they violate. They're not similar. They're identical. When I saw that, I couldn't believe it. I was absolutely stunned, and I remember picking my brain up off the floor over the next month and a half, even though college finals were going on. I did a lot of research in this, and the conclusion I came to after the first of the year in 2012, after the president signed it on New Year's Eve, was I have to fight this, because I don't see anybody else doing it. No one else is standing up. If there was somebody else standing up, I would have joined them. but I didn't see anyone doing it, and I decided I have to do it then. And so went down to my city council, brought about 21 of my friends, both from the Occupy movement and the Young Republicans and the Young Americans for Liberty, and brought them all together to the city council. And we approached our mayor. I figured it would be an easy task. I figured it would just be, approaching the mayor, you're not going to allow the military to come in and detain an American citizen without charge or without trial, are you? Well, it wasn't such an easy task, as I found out. We're ridiculed. My mayor actually said that we should go back to basic government class, and my councilman told me to do something that I actually have an effect on. So I did. Today, PANDA is we're the largest organization until October, when we decentralized. Now we are the largest movement against a federal law at a local level in U.S. history. We have had 4 cities ban the NDAA and the laws of war from impacting their city, all because the National Defense Authorization Act does the exact same thing and gives the exact same authority to the president that Executive Order 9066 gave to FDR when we detained 120,000 Japanese Americans without charge and without trial in arguably one of the most racist and one of the most prominent civil rights violations in history. And now President Obama has the same power that FDR had and will more than likely use that power on Americans, on American soil. When they're asked if they're using the power by a federal judge, they refuse to answer. We have reason to believe they are. Our organization exists to stop that from happening in every city, every county, and every state across America.
You know, I recognize 9/11 as a false flag attack. And I put Building Number 7 on the cover of my Free American magazine back in 2004, and pointed out that if that Building Number 7 had came down without a plane hitting it, and Larry Silverstein, of course, made the comment that he and the fire department decided to bring the building down, and they tried to kill me over that. I believe. I don't see any other explanation for everything that's happened over this. But this false flag attack that brought us into these wars for this decade here. Was this, and maybe you can clear this up for me. I have been telling people that what's happening here is the same thing that happened in the Soviet Union. They went on to, after the Bolsheviks took over, after they got the power there, they went on to murder 60 million white Christian Russians. We never hear about that here. So are we talking about fascism here? Or are we talking about communism here? And exactly what's the is there a difference here that I'm not understanding? They both seem to be tyranny. They say, you know, we've got congressmen in the Senate and congressmen and senators in Washington that are, some are Democrats, some are Republicans, and I call them two wings of the same bird. And that's kind of the way I feel about communism and fascism. It's still tyranny, whatever way you want to cut it. How far? Where are we there? How far off am I?
Say as a nation, and the main difference between communism and fascism, though they're both tyranny, though they're both extremely dangerous, the main difference between communism and fascism and corporations on everything, along with the state. And you look at America, you look at how we've kind of came around, managed to refrain from becoming a communist nation. We're definitely moving toward, if we're not already there, utter complete fascism. But, as rightly noted, they're both tyranny. They're both extreme tyranny. And they're both this tyranny of control. They're both this tyranny of the government believes it has the right to infringe on individuals and their life, liberty, and property. And it stems from this need or this want of the state, of the government, to control people and to control their everyday lives and then to harshly punish them when they don't listen. And that's what we have today. We have a society where crime exists. I mean, you look at the movie Minority Report. I'm not sure how many of your listeners have seen the movie Minority Report. Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise plays a police officer in service of his local government, and his job is to stop people before they commit a crime. His job is pre-crime. And what he realizes after he jails all these people, he thinks he's doing a great job. What he realizes when he is jailed for a crime he was not about to commit, the danger of pre-crime is anyone can say you're a criminal, and you can be locked up for being a criminal without any intention whatsoever to commit a crime. And that's what the word terrorism is in this nation. That's what 9/11, that's the way our nation has responded to 9/11, is in this, if you're a terrorist, all of a sudden you are not innocent until proven guilty. All of a sudden, all the government has to do is call you a terrorist, and this is where the 2012 NDAA springs from. All the government has to do is call you a terrorist. How does the government define terrorists now? Quote, those who are reverent of individual liberty, suspicious of centralized federal authority, believing conspiracy theories that involve grave threat to national sovereignty and or personal liberty. That's from the Department of Homeland Security START report published 31 days after the 2012 NDAA was into law. Recently, two people from the Tar Sands Resistance out in Oklahoma were charged with faking a terrorist attack for unfurling a banner with glitter on it in a TransUnion building. Recently, the anti-fracking film, the guy who headed up the anti-fracking film was called a terrorist. This idea that as soon as the government calls you a terrorist, you have zero rights, has pervaded American society, and this is what it leads to, this idea of pre-crime. So are we under fascism or communism? I believe it's fascism. Does it matter when they're calling everyone a terrorist and when they're saying pre-crime is important and you can be arrested without ever having committed an act of aggression or a crime against another human being? That is dangerous, and that is tyranny. And the last two times the United States has done that, we detained 15,000 people in the 1860s. We detained 120,000 people in the 1940s. How many people were detained this time?
You know, when I witnessed, I was in Miami, had a number of businesses, a number of things going on, and I watched what happened at Waco. And I was so outraged about that. I mean, I was screaming at the television, where's the Texas Rangers? Where's the DPS? Where's the Sheriff's Department? Why are they letting them do this? And I became so outraged that I did two things shortly after. I started this radio show. I started the Free American magazine, which was nationally distributed up until 10 years ago. And I started the militias. I immediately got attacked, and then I think it was Senate Bill 1959 on homegrown terrorists. Again, trying to turn me into a terrorist. I said, what part of the Second Amendment don't you understand, guys? I was listed in armed and dangerous, false patriots, everything by all these propaganda units that are work for the bankers. And I think our real enemies are the bankers. It was the bankers that funded communism. It was the bankers that funded Hitler. It's the bankers start every war, and they fund both sides, so they make money. No matter who dies, no matter who wins. And isn't that what we're facing right now?
I think whether you pinpoint the bankers or whether you pinpoint the bank cartel, or whether you pinpoint politicians or whoever you pinpoint for what's happening right now, in any circumstance, we are dealing with a very dangerous situation right now. We're dealing with a situation in which we are according our government the ability and the legal authority to kill an American citizen anywhere in the world, detain an American citizen anywhere in the world without charge or trial. Candidate for Congress in Maine put it best when he was speaking to the Maine Republican Party. He said, I want you all to, any veterans in the room, raise your hands. And several people in the room raise their hands. Okay. Everyone look around at those hands who are raised. Now imagine those people coming through your door at 2 a.m. and taking you to Guantanamo Bay. And that is exactly what we're facing today. So does it really matter who's behind it? No. It doesn't really matter who is doing it. Especially with the term, look at the term terrorism. Regardless of what happened on 9/11, regardless of who was behind the attacks of September 11, 2001, we're dealing with today a situation in which the American public view a certain class of people as having zero rights. And if you get rid of the stigma of the word terrorism, you expose the word terrorism as the paper tiger that it is, then it doesn't matter how many of these terrorist attacks, whether it's the government pulling them or whether it's foreign countries pulling them. It doesn't matter how many terrorist attacks they pull. If they don't affect the psyche of the American people, there's no reason for anyone to pull them. And so if we stop playing pet detective, as I call it, and looking into trying to find who's behind this or who's behind that or who's behind this, then we're going to be a lot more, unified, because faces and people often divide as to who's behind what or who's behind this. But also, we're is most impacting the problem because power that corrupts. It is not a person. Yes, people are corrupt, but it is mostly power itself that corrupts. If we go after a person, someone else is going to take their place. The idea is to remove the power, and then when someone else, that they no longer have the power to become corrupt, and people who are corrupt aren't attracted to a place that has little power.
All right. I've got to make one little call here, so if I can get back up on one of my stations here. Okay, I think we're doing that. You may hear a little ringing here, but don't pay attention to it. Yep, still busy. Why is it still busy here? All right, we'll skip that. I'll download that later. I've referred to this war on terror as a war against anyone, anywhere in the world that doesn't want to go along with this whole concept of one world government. What is their goal here? I mean, I also filmed the first Homeland Security meeting after 9/11. They had rolled FEMA into Department of Homeland Security. Colonel John Brinkerhoff was lecturing law enforcement in Albuquerque, and he said, in case of a natural disaster of significant magnitude, like an earthquake along the New Madrid fault line, a single case of outbreak of smallpox in a major metropolitan area, or an atomic blast in the United States, we'll need 400,000 well-armed, well-trained, organized, disciplined troops to control the American people, because some of them just won't follow orders. I said, yeah, some of us won't line up on a Kmart parking lot to get a vaccination for a disease that's been eradicated in this country for 100 years or more. And this was the precursor to the NDAA. This is this whole war on terror. It's scam for one world government. What is their goal? One world government? Now Aaron Russo, he made the statement. He talked to Nicholas Rockefeller, who told him that the goal was that he predicted the attack on the World Trade Center. He predicted, he told him they were going to have a war in Afghanistan and Iraq. And the eventual goal was to have everybody chipped, have this RFID chip in everybody around the world. So this is more than just America, isn't it? I mean, we're really, they're using American troops to fight this war on terror, and the war is and he says it's going to be fought here on this, in this land, in this country. We've been exempt before, but not now. Now the war is going to be on America. The enemy's weak. Doesn't have trains. Doesn't have planes. Doesn't have helicopters. Doesn't have anything. So they're going to use unconventional means. He's talking about us. He's talking about the American people here. The war is against us, isn't it, Dan?
If you think about it, every government throughout history has wanted a way to get rid of dissidents. George Washington said that the state is like fire, a dangerous servant and a fearful master. And he was right. If you look at the United States government and the way that it treats people now, this term terrorism went from meaning, oh, this guy from the Middle East, to now anyone who challenges state power is now considered a terrorist. And that is a very big problem, and it's happened throughout history. If you look at one of the first major uses of the word terrorism, which was in 1738 in Britain, they released the top 10 things that they were concerned about as far as the British government was concerned. And one of the top 10 things was terrorism. 30 years later, who were the terrorists? The American colonists. And if you think about this idea of one world government or what have you, it's very simple. I mean, it's been in every comic book that most comic books have been produced. It's somebody trying to take over the world. Most empires try to take over the world throughout history. I mean, taking over the world that they knew existed, however big they thought the world was at that point, taking over the world has always been a goal, because not only does power corrupt, but when someone gets a little power, they want a little more, and they want a little more, and they want as much. If we owned the moon, there'd be people trying to take that over too. So every threat to their power, they will try to eliminate as quickly as possible. Today it's the term terrorism. Tomorrow it could be the term child molester. It doesn't matter. They're trying to remove dissent from people who are challenging the power, and this is why terrorists are now considered people with 7 days of food in their home. This is why terrorists are now considered people who know the Constitution like the back of their hand. This is why terrorists are now considered any threat to government power, whether it's on the left or whether it's on the right. This is why they're throwing around the term terrorist whenever they can, because it's a catch-all phrase to say, you have zero rights, you have zero liberties, and that's why as an organization and as a movement, we try to help people across the country say, no, we're not going to allow this to happen in our city. No, we're not going to allow this to happen in our town. Congress isn't listening. State government isn't listening. So we have to take up the fight at our local communities, in our local governments. We have to say, enough. We will not allow this to happen. If a local government, if 3 local governments, 3 cities, when the Japanese Americans were taken from their homes and sent to detention camps in 1942, if 3 cities had said, no, we will not allow federal troops to take our Japanese Americans, the feds would have backed down. And that's exactly what would have happened, what will happen today if we can prevent it. And now we know from looking at history what happens when this type of power is given to any government, and we can see what they could and what they will use it for. We have the chance to stop it, but there's only a small cool-down period for every law, as I'm sure you know. Well, they don't put the law into use right away. They wait a little bit. And if we can take advantage of the cool-down period on this one, we can stop it, we can reverse it. You saw it with the war on Syria recently. The Americans will reverse that, and an amazing feat that I haven't seen before like that. And we can do it again. But it's going to take concerted effort to stop this from happening, or there is a push to centralize power at every step of the way, and anyone who gets in the way of that could be considered a terrorist and could be considered a threat. And the more they can do to a terrorist, the more they can do to a threat like that, the better off they are.
The Department of Homeland Security put out an assessment a few years back, and they pointed the finger at Christians, they pointed the finger at veterans, as well as militias around. And I've said anytime a tyrannical regime takes over, they go after three classes of people in order. They go after the farmers first, the self-sufficient family farms, because they don't want you being able to feed yourself. Ninth plank on the Communist Manifesto is corporate farms. And second, they go after the intelligentsia, anyone that's smart enough to know what they're trying to do. And third, they go after the veterans or law enforcement that are loyal to the old regime. We do have some sheriffs out here in counties in Texas here. The militias are reforming under the sheriff's county by county. I think that's a good thing. But who do we have? What the veterans are being demonized. They're afraid the veterans are going to be recruited by people like you and me, and so they're trying to demonize the veterans before they even get home. How do we combat that?
By remembering their people too and reaching out. You rightly noted that tyrannical regimes go after classes of people. One of the people they after people that they must retain control of is the users, whether it's the police, whether it's the veterans, whether it's the military, the maintain control of its enforcers. But in America, we have a very unique situation because our enforcers take up the Constitution. And if we can show them that, they took to the Constitution, if it does any law that is passed, 2012 NDAA can't be implemented. The Patriot Act wouldn't be implemented. A lot of instances of police brutality we have today wouldn't be implemented. So the government wants it to be the police versus the people. But if we can pull the enforcing class, including military and the police, from the clutches of the federal government, from the clutches of state governments, which tend to be almost just as corrupt, then and bring them back to what we once had, which was peace officers, keepers of peace, and a constitutional military. Tyranny in our federal government, tyranny our state government, tyranny our local governments, because once they lose the people to enforce the tyranny, it can no longer enforce that law becomes null and void. And that is another angle that I'm really glad there's an organization that we work with called Oath Keepers. I'm really glad they're working on that angle to get people to understand, in both in the military and the police, that their oath to the Constitution, their oath to protect the rights of the people. So there's an age-old doctrine in America that's called allegiance and protection. The only reason that we allow you to protect us, we swear allegiance to you, is because you're actually protecting us. You're protecting our rights. Once a government no longer protects the rights is no longer insistent on the government no longer is protecting our rights. The people have the right to alter or abolish it, and that's going to happen very soon if the government doesn't turn around, and tyrants are arrogant. Tyrants are extremely arrogant. But right now, the tyrants need to realize that they're going to be turned around if they don't stop, because little by little by little, though you have this creeping incrementalism, the stronger tyranny grips a nation, the more people it will crush, and the more people will say enough, and like me, realize this has gone too far, stand up, and the race against time is, can they implement full tyranny without the American people waking up fast enough?
Well, I've been trying to wake the people up for 20 years, and I think we have, because we do have organizations like Oath Keepers. My friend Richard Mack has organized the Constitutional Sheriffs and Police Officers Association, and somebody before him, Jack McLam, Officer Jack McLam, who just died this last weekend. He really tried to unite the police and and let them know that we're not their enemies. You know, we ought to be working together, and that is what they're trying to do. They're militarizing the police, giving them drones, giving them everything else to try to set them against us.
Mhm. And if you give them the militarized equipment, they're going to use it. And you know, that's one of the things I'm really happy to see in America is I see a huge backlash against local police getting militarized equipment. And I think that's very important. Is people are not accepting the fact that their local government should have an MRAP. They're not accepting the fact that their local government should have a drone or a Bearcat. They're saying their local police should not get their hands on this type of military equipment. Because the military shoot to kill, the police protect and serve. And people are understanding that, and I think that's one of the greatest ways to look at the awakening that's been happening in America is just to look at the comments, just to look at the concerns people have about this militarized equipment entering their city and entering their town. In Concord, New Hampshire, a great example of what could happen under the NDAA in Concord, New Hampshire, the local police department called the Free State Project and Occupy New Hampshire terrorists in order to get a Bearcat. And the application was subpoenaed or supported by the American Civil Liberties Union of New Hampshire, and a huge civil battle ensued. And during one of the speeches at City Council, a Marine colonel said, "Look, we're building a domestic army here, and I can't believe no one's seeing it." And that speech went viral. The speech went all over the internet, almost 1 million views. And that, along with many other points from both the left and the right, we're starting to see a pushback against the militarization of police forces and the nationalization of police forces. And that is really, really a good thing. And we're starting to see, little by little, the American people realize that this is tyranny. This is anti-tyranny. This is a police state. And when they realize that, they're pushing back little by little. And on a local level, we're starting to see this, pushing their police departments to reject this equipment that we didn't see 3 or 4 years ago, that I certainly wasn't involved in 3 or 4 years ago. And we're little by little, we're winning this on a local level. And then eventually it's going to move to national if we can keep the momentum up and give people an outlet, give people actions to take. You know, every revolution has had a few organizations or key people at the center, and then spontaneous action throughout. And we're starting to have that today. We're starting to have spontaneous citizen action outside of small organizations like ourselves who are willing to help them. We're starting to see spontaneous citizen action, both left and right come together. Common Ground movement is a great example of that. Left, right coming together to say, enough. Follow the Constitution. And the last time you went this far, things did not turn out well for America. So we're not going to let this happen again. Not in our lifetime, and not to the next generation.
How do you see this coming down? I mean, first, the media is not on our side, so we've got the internet for now, and you're using that very effectively. But how do you see this coming down? Are we? They're militarizing against us, like they said in the Homeland Security meeting, the briefing of law enforcement. They said they're going to need 400,000 well-armed, well-trained, organized, disciplined troops to control the American people. what we saw in Boston, that was really a preview, wasn't it?
You always do a test run when you're trying to militarize a country, when you're trying to militarize a territory, when you're trying to occupy territory. Watertown, Massachusetts. There's a good possibility that was a test run. According to the Atlantic, the military led that, supported by 3,000 law enforcement officers. Not law enforcement led, but the military led the charge. In Big Bear Lake, California, a town of 3,000, homes were searched without a warrant for Chris Dormer. The military led that search. When the military starts controlling land in America, it starts controlling the American people, that's when you have absolute, full-blown tyranny. And to answer your question as far as how is it going to go down, that's a million-dollar question. And I think the best way to answer how will it go down is how will we let it. All government, from dictatorships to democracies to republics, all government operates by the consent of the governed. The only difference between those is how hard it is for the governed to withdraw their consent. In America today, we have a chance to withdraw our consent because the framework of a republic is still in place. We have a chance to withdraw our consent and say no, and say enough. And so how it goes down depends on what we do as a people over the next few years, and will the American people, even a small segment, in the American Revolution, 3% fell. If only a small segment of the American people says, no, enough. We care enough about our kids, we care enough about our family, we care enough about the people who won't stand up, that we will say enough, and we will educate our law enforcement, and we will educate our local police, and we will get out in the streets, and we will say no, and we will little by little pull consent from all the unconstitutional acts that our federal government does, starting one by one, whether it's drones, whether it's surveillance, whether it's NDAA, little by little pulling the bricks out of the bottom of this pyramid, we can stop it. Or if we don't, it's very obvious to me, history says it'll be a very, very dangerous and very, very dark point in American history. You know, the cycle of the body politic, coined by former British Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli, sets out the cycle that a country goes through, from liberty, absolute liberty, to absolute tyranny and slavery. That cycle usually takes 250 to 300 years. America's 250th year is 2026. If we don't do something, we're right on schedule. However, there are underpinnings of a revolution. There are underpinnings of a peaceful revolution in this country that have not been seen in other countries when they came around to this point. In Germany, in France, they didn't see a resistance until the Germans moved in. In several different countries, they didn't see resistance during World War I. In other countries where tyranny arose, you did not see a resistance until there was violent crackdowns on dissenters. We're not to the point yet. We're close. We're not to the point yet where there's violent crackdowns on dissent. Yet there's a resistance, a very strong resistance building in this country, because we have the values to back it up, and we have the internet. The instantaneous communication between people. We can learn what our government is doing without our government wanting us to know what our government is doing. And little by little, we, the American people, have a chance to stop this from happening, but the choice is ours. Do we care enough about the next generation to create a world for them? Do we care enough about the American soldiers who gave their lives on foreign soil to create a world that they would actually want to live in, or not?
There are groups around that are getting pretty proactive, and I think this is it's a good sign. I'm working with one gentleman that has a plan for that kind of follows on the coattails of what I suggested. I years ago, watching everything that was developing, I said, how can we fight this? How can we resist this? And over 10 years ago, I came up with a plan for something called Liberty Villages, which was taking a self-sufficient family farm and restoring it by populating it with homeless veterans, people that were out of work, and get together here and grow your own food and generate your own energy from everything God gave us, and then we don't need the banks, the government, for much of anything. Uh, that they didn't like that plan, and today, right now, they are going up in Arlington, Texas. There were a group of people up there had something called the Garden of Eden, and they were just growing food, not a militarized thing, not trying to grow pot, not growing drugs, nothing, just growing food. And they sent the cops in on them, stomped on their tomatoes, destroyed their gardens, handcuffed them. Didn't find any drugs, nothing. Didn't arrest anybody. Just tried to frighten them out of being self-sufficient. Even there's homes and places in California, just outside of LA. People are growing 5,000 pounds of food in their backyard, and yet the government is trying to discourage that. They just don't want you being able to feed yourself. Is that it? Or is it worse than that? I mean, Monsanto has created these genetically modified foods that rats won't eat, but they're feeding it to you and your children. Is that part of the attack on American sovereignty, or are they just trying to flat out kill us?
It's really difficult to determine intent on a lot of things. They do see a general plan toward tyranny in America. I mean, if you look at the 2008 NDAA, set out funding for the Council of Governors. And the Council of Governors is a series of 10 governors that's picked every couple of years to essentially enforce a continuity government plan where a natural disaster or something huge to happen. These 10 state governors would run, each one would run a certain region, and they would move forward with a plan. Now, these state governors in the executive order that created the Council of Governors are to look at how to use the military on U.S. soil and how to utilize things like the NDAA, things like the Patriot Act. And this is 4 years for the 2012 NDAA, the executive order 2 years for the 2012 NDAA. So you definitely see a plan coming about here. And why would they go after someone who is self-sufficient? Because that person doesn't need the government. They're at the center. And the government, as a rule, will go after, and all throughout history, every government on the face of the earth has gone after dissenters and gone after people that didn't need it, gone after people who broke the mold, and gone after people who defied it. And so you have a situation there. Maybe police were just going in and trying to find drugs. Maybe that was the ostensible purpose of the raid. And if they were, they still have no right to do that under the Constitution. But this is all designed to essentially crush any sort of dissent in any way, shape, or form. And the larger a government gets and the more powerful a government gets, the more risks it will take in crushing dissent. And so you have a plan. They definitely want to crush dissent. And that's what you brought the Soviet Union earlier. You look at USSR Penal Code 38. It punishes not holding dissent. Not just dissenting. Not living dissent as punishable by death or life imprisonment. and then gets sent to Siberia. Why don't they want to have that in the United States? They absolutely do. There are many people in the United States who want that to happen, because government is force. And those who do not agree with it, those who are dissenting, the bigger the government gets and the more powerful it gets, the more it wants to use force against them, and the easier it makes it for itself. So, could I say whether that specific raid was force or not? Absolutely it was force. Could I say what the reason was, or the intent? Probably not. But they were dissenting against the government. They did not need or did not want the government, and therefore government saw it as dissent and moved in on those people. And that is a pattern that happens in every government around the world. And the closer you get to tyranny, the more often it happens, the tighter the fist clenches on people who dissent.
You know, the Ayn Rand said that the government has no control over honest citizens, so they got to make criminals out of us. That was about 50 years ago. And even before that, they, in my opinion here, they started the war on drugs was a war on the American people, a way to penalize people for using natural substances. And today we've got more people in prison than any communist country out there. Most of them in there for victimless crimes. You know, what you got in your pocket, son? What you got in your pocket, son? Whoa, you're gonna go to work for IBM here in this prison system. Is that am I just an old hippie overreacting, or did we see this? I mean, is the war on drugs is a war on the American people, in my opinion.
I mean, when you speak to this kind of idea of a war on anything, it automatically militarizes the entire interaction. And so we already have the war on poverty, war on drugs. I mean, first of all, how well does it work? I mean, if the war on drugs is how a war is supposed to work, we should have a war on money and a war on jobs. But secondly, it's completely unconstitutional. The government has no right whatsoever to regulate a drug. It took an amendment to create prohibition, took an amendment to get rid of it. The government has no right whatsoever to regulate any sort of product, including a drug. And so you take this war on drugs, and if you look at the Fourth Amendment, especially, almost every single Fourth Amendment case at the Supreme Court level that poked a hole in the Fourth Amendment and poked another hole in the Fourth Amendment, poked another hole, was a prohibition case, whether it's from alcohol, whether it's from drugs. Almost every single case was a case of prohibition. And that was a reason for them to start to turn the military domestically on the American people. It started with the police, and eventually it moved to more and more militarized. As you're just accused of a drug user, you automatically are. And they can use whatever force necessary, and they can come in and shoot your dog. And you start to move that into a militarized society, then absolutely. Every form of government tyranny, every form of government invading the rights of the individual eventually turns into more brutal and more tyrannical if the people don't stop it at its core. And that's what's happened with the war on drugs. If you look at National Guard units, there's a section in the 2014 NDAA that renews funding from the 2004 National Defense Authorization Act to turn National Guard counter-drug units into counter-terror units. It's that easy. And so if you look at the war on drugs, it's almost a precursor, as you pointed out. I would say it is. I'd say it's almost a precursor to the war on terror, because it gave them an excuse to use law enforcement against law-abiding Americans wherever they could, and little by little that law enforcement became more militarized as drug use and drug users became more stigmatized in America. And we have this problem in this country with creating a class of people who does not have rights as soon as the government says they don't have rights. And the way to beat back war on drugs, war on terror, the way to beat back things like this is everyone has the right to a trial. Everyone is innocent until proven guilty, no matter what you call them, or where you say they were, or what you say they did. And that is the way to turn it back. But I would say the war on drugs was a precursor to the war on terror, because it allowed police to start going after people for a victimless crime, which is a precursor to going after people for never committing crime in the first place.
Yeah, one of my statements is, Mr. Obama, tear down that wall, replace it with tables, abolish all the laws against victimless crimes, and allow the Mexicans, allow the Colombians, allow the Peruvians to bring all of their crops up here, lay it on the table, pay a duty, and let the Americans take it home with them. Whatever, without threat of jail. I wrote novels about this 45 years ago, and in retrospect and going back and looking at what I wrote 45 years ago, I think I was right on then, and this is one of the things that we have to deal with. We got 50 million people out there who use marijuana. I went to prison for having marijuana in Texas 45 years ago. Today, if you bribe a doctor, you can smoke it anywhere you're in at least 20 states, and we've got 2 that have at least made it semi-legal. So I wasn't too far off 45 years ago, I don't think.
You get enough tyranny, and eventually the people will go back at it. You look at the war on drugs, and you have an example of the picture in people's mind when they visualize a war on drugs is an armed officer, bursting through someone's home, usually the wrong door, and shooting the dogs, and holding the family hostage, and searching the house, and finding nothing, and dragging the family out in the street, and that is the visual people have of this war on drugs. So they're going back at it. They're fighting back. And little by little, the more people you affect under the hand of tyranny, the more people will push back. And in America, we have that chance. In America, we have a great chance to push back, but there's a small window for it. And if you look at, regardless of whether you think the drug is the worst thing on the face of the earth, regardless of whether you think the drug helps anyone at all, the fact is that the way the drug laws are enforced, and the fact that there are any drug laws in the first place, the fact that there is this prohibition, is an excuse to utilize the police forces and to fund the police forces and make the police forces more militarized and to make the police forces and go after people who would do no harm to another person or will not at that point do any harm to another person, from victimless crime to pre-crime seems to be the path that nations around the world take. That's obviously the path we've taken. It's gone from drug users to terrorists. And from terrorists, who's next?
Well, it's I guess I've been carrying these novels around with me for about 45 years. I guess it's time to get them published now.
Wouldn't hurt.
In the novels that I wrote, they abolished all the laws against victimless crimes in 46 states, and in 4 states they kept the same laws that they got today in most states. And by showing the difference in a civilized society and a police state, I think I really accomplished what I was trying to accomplish with those books when I wrote them a long time ago. And now, today, I've got a lot more knowledge, and I can flesh them out a little bit and start putting them out there. But they are coming down against. Have you had any problems? I mean, they arranged an accident for me and kept me drugged for 3 months. Ran up a $750,000 hospital bill for 3 broken ribs after a motorcycle accident. And I think we do have a drug problem in this country, but I don't think it's from cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, or marijuana. I think it's from these prescription medications that they're feeding us, and they're giving it to our soldiers. If a soldier comes back and he's diagnosed with post-traumatic stress syndrome, which I think is like kind of a cover words for somebody that has a conscience, that might feel bad about what they've done to a bunch of innocent civilians out there in Iraq or Afghanistan. And their answer is to drug them, to give them these psychotropic drugs. And we've got more veterans, more of my brothers that went to Vietnam. I didn't go. I volunteered, but I didn't go. And more Vietnam vets have committed suicide when they got back to this country than were killed by the Vietnamese. I think that's a national tragedy. How about it?
When the government sanctions violence against anyone, you have this idea in our society that morals are subjective. Morals just kind of work some places and don't work others. If you have morals, you have morals. Everyone has a right to a trial. Everyone has a right to a trial. If you can't kill aggressively, if you cannot aggress on someone to kill them, you can't aggress on someone to kill them in any way, shape, and form. And we have policemen who said, oh yeah, you can kill them, it's fine. What is the argument? There was a police officer who killed a young boy in North Carolina who's schizophrenic, and after he's tasered by two police officers, police officer allegedly walks up, shoots the boy, and says, we don't have time for this. And what's the excuse? He wasn't complying. He wasn't following orders. Since when in this country does not following orders equal execution? Yet we've given certain people this authority to say, you can kill, but you can't. You can kill, but you can't. You can kill, but you can't. Either everyone has rights, or no one has rights. Because once you single out one person that has the right to kill, and one person doesn't, whether they're a soldier or they're police, when you single out, when the United States went into several countries, some people viewed it as invasion, some people viewed it as an occupation, some people viewed it as defending America, but to a person in that country, just like where the Chinese succumbed to American soil, to a person in that country, that was viewed to them as an invasion. And today, we have this idea that a certain class of people, called terrorists, a certain class of people has no rights. Basically, anyone with a Middle Eastern beard, certain amount of people has no rights. And we have applied that to them. Throughout history, we applied it to different classes of people. We applied it to Black Americans. We applied it to Japanese Americans. We applied it to Mexican Americans. With certain groups, people have no rights. And certain groups of people have the right to kill others. And what kind of effect does that have on the American spirit? What kind of effect does that have on the American body? You have soldiers coming back with post-traumatic stress disorder. Absolutely. Because you're giving them a license to violate another person's rights. And then you're not only giving them a license, but you're ordering them to do so. And they're going to come away, if they're conscious, if they're the soul, if you haven't beaten the soul out of them, they're going to come away with a real sense of remorse. And now the country's answer, instead of looking at what are the problems with giving someone with a badge a moral right to kill another human being, and what are the problems with setting our principles aside when we don't like the other guy, we decide to just drug them and forget about them. And that's, the state does not care. The government does not care about people. The only thing the government cares about is power. And that's what we have as an epidemic in this country of veterans who are committing suicide. You saw the letter written in Gawker recently from a former intelligence agent, veteran, I want to say he was in the Army, who committed suicide. Wrote a long letter to his family saying, look, they haven't taken care of me, the things they forced me to do I can't even discuss, but he had a conscience, he had a soul. And he committed suicide. And we have to, as a society, look at this problem of, oh, we can set our morals aside when they have a gun or when they have a badge. We can set our morals aside when we give them an order to go into a foreign country or when we shoot at someone who doesn't look like us. And when we have that issue of setting our morals aside, then we're going to run into problems, unintended consequences, just like this, where we set our morals aside as a nation but the soldiers don't set their morals aside as people.
You know, I've tried to point out to people, you know, the whole Cold War, the Russians were never our enemies. I don't believe the Chinese people are our enemies. The Cold War was another false flag to develop more weapons of mass destruction, to keep us afraid. They want us to be afraid. And their other strategy is divide and conquer. And that's what they've done with Republicans and Democrats, conservative and liberals. We're all Americans. We're all people. We're all humans. You know, there shouldn't be this division here. And I also refer to television as they don't call it programming for nothing. Aren't they using the television and of course the newspapers? I mean, it's all turned into propaganda to promote this war on terror.
I mean, you see the response from the mainstream media to the National Defense Authorization Act and when they covered it. CNN gave it 2 mentions during prime time, never a prime time spot. Fox covered it for about 30 seconds. In fact, the longest network to cover it was MSNBC, which covered it for about 30 minutes on the Rachel Maddow show. And other than that, mainstream media paid little to no attention to a law that arguably strips most of the constitutional protections from the American people, and now puts it in the statute that they kill an American citizen. Now puts it in the statute they can detain an American citizen. Where's the mainstream media on this? No, they weren't. Absolutely not. They didn't cover this at all. They left the alternative media. It was up to the internet. And you look at the way and the companies who own the mainstream media, things like that, and you start to see a correlation between this lack of mainstream media coverage and this kind of working with the government and being the government's mouthpiece. And you look at any country that has fallen into tyranny, and one of the keys to that is to control the media. Kim Jong-un, Kim Jong-il, both controlled the media for their country. And in America, our media, our mainstream media, is controlled. And this is why they're trying to kill the internet. It's because the internet is now this instantaneous free flow of communication to any person anywhere in the United States and any person anywhere in the world that now can go around the mainstream media. I mean, CNN lost half its viewers. CNN and I want to say MSNBC or Fox lost half their viewers last year. That is a huge amount of people moving away from this idea of the mainstream media controlling everything and moving away from this control grid of the mainstream media, moving to the internet, moving to an open and free internet where at least, even, a lot of information on the internet just flat out isn't true. But at least on the internet, you have competing information. And now, instead of just getting one mouthpiece telling you how it is, now you have several different voices with several different opinions, and now you as a citizen can make your own informed decision. And honestly, with the 2012 NDAA, I'm kind of glad mainstream media didn't cover it. Because what the mainstream media does when it covers things like this is it makes it into a left-right issue. And you mentioned 2 wings of the same damn bird. It makes it into a left-right issue. And you look at this left-right issue, and you see that all it is just 2 wings of the same bird, just 2 sides of the same coin. John Adams, in a letter in 1780, wrote that there is nothing I dread as much as the division of the Republic in 2 great parties, each arranged under its leader, and each concerting measures in opposition to each other. This, in my humble apprehension, is the greatest political evil under our Constitution. John Adams, in 1780. That's what the mainstream media does with an issue, is they take an issue and they'll divide it. Left, right, Democrat, Republican, and they haven't done it with the National Defense Authorization Act. What has that allowed us to do? That's allowed us to go into places with a clean slate. That's allowed us to go into places as an anti-partisan issue, as an anti-partisan goal. That's allowed us to walk into places where otherwise they would just turn us away because it'd be a left or right issue. This is an anti-partisan issue, and I've never seen the American people come together on anything like the National Defense Authorization Act And this can be the turnkey. This can be the key that turns things around, because neither the left, nor the right, nor the center, nor the libertarians, nor the independents want to have their speech stifled. And they realize, even if they argue over all these different issues, arguing over all those different issues doesn't do them any good if they can't ever argue the issue, and they can get detained for arguing the issue. That's a huge problem. That's a huge issue. And so we look at today the National Defense Authorization Act, the Patriot Act, several other acts that the American people are now coming together behind, that the mainstream media has tried to divide them, but little by little, people are moving away from mainstream, realizing their propaganda, and one of the things this country has failed to do is hold control and control the media, and until they do that, it'll be very difficult for them to control the American people.
You know, back in 1996, I got involved in presidential politics. A friend of mine was running for president. His name was Charles Collins. And nobody ever knew that Charles Collins was running, because every time he got up to talk about taking back the Federal Reserve, that every cameraman on stage turned the camera off, pointed them at the ground, and went out and took a smoke break. In two of the states, they even unplugged his microphone. And, you know, I really came to the conclusion we're not going to solve anything by voting, especially if the votes are being controlled, counted electronically. We got no way of verifying who's running, and you never know about anybody that's actually wanting to do something. Ron Paul was probably the closest to this, and Americans donated over $1 billion to the last presidential election, and we got the same thing over and over and over again. Nothing changes.
Well, the only thing I would say to that is, on a national level, voting in general is very corrupt. However, if you do more than vote, but use your vote as a weapon, the vote is a very dangerous and very important weapon, especially at the local level, especially with city councilmen. Because how do you force someone in the position of power to do what you want? You don't do it by walking up to them hat in hand and going, well, will you please do this? We're going to petition you. Will you please do this? Will you please do that? It's not you get to do what you want. It's not you get any politician to do what you want. If they're in a place of power, they're just not going to do what you want, regardless of whatever you tell them. How you get them to do what you want is you have the threat of being unseated. You have the threat of being not gaining re-election. You have the threat of not moving up the political ladder. You have the threat of getting a very bad reputation in the community. You have the threat of the politician losing. At the local level especially, and even to some extent at the state level, you can use your vote as a weapon to remove corrupt politicians from office, just because they won't follow your orders, because they won't follow what you want, to remove them from office just by voting for someone else, and then when that other person gets into office, to do the exact same thing to them if they don't follow you at a local level, especially at a local level, and to some extent at a state level. This works extremely well to get them into line. They will pass whatever you need them to pass if you bring some very serious pressure their way, and the way you bring that pressure is you make them think they could be unseated, they could lose an election. So as much as voting doesn't matter, on a presidential level, absolutely not. Congressional level, usually not. And even some local and state races, usually not. It's also an indication of the voting of the electorate, an indication of the population that they do not and will not accept this person. And at the local level, you can use your vote as a weapon to remove people who've already violated the Constitution, who've already violated your rights and refuse to listen to you from office, and replace them with new ones. And just like the recall election in Colorado, every state legislator in Colorado takes a recall threat seriously now. Every state legislator in Colorado knows that if their people band together and go to say, we're going to recall you if you don't pass this, they know they're facing a very serious threat.
On my,
And
I was just going to mention that. I got it up right now. I pulled it up. On my magazine, which I have put my magazine back out on the internet. I figured why not cut out all the middlemen. You can buy a Free American magazine, which will be available for $2.99. And this next issue, now let me take a call here, just a second here. Hello, who do we have here? You're on the air. I am doing my show right now. Who do we have here? I guess it's somebody. I must have been a bill collector. the I've got pretty much on about every other page. I've got recallpetitions.com. We the people voting out all who break their oath to the Constitution. So this is being put into effect. We are going to do this. And by the way, I'm also laying in the most of your website here on the NDAA on PANDA Unite for this next issue of the magazine, and I would appreciate any help I can get to get it out there to everybody. We need if they've tried to break me time and time again. I mean, I had one magazine sold for $500,000, and by the time somebody contacted every stockholder in the company to tell them what a right-wing radical and racist anti-Semite Clay Douglas was, the deal fell through. And I figured if I just had as many people that bought the Free American 10 years ago in the bookstores and Barnes and Noble, that all my financial problems would be solved, and I'd be able to travel again and promote organizations like your websites like yours that people really need to know. You know, this is a great information you're giving out. This gives hope. This isn't in this interview here. We're not projecting fear. We're not projecting hate. We're projecting survival. We're projecting answers. We're projecting exactly what I took an oath 45 years ago, or a little bit more than that now, I guess, to defend this and protect this Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. This is what we're doing. We're not the enemy. We're not terrorists. We're certainly not crazy. You are doing what needs to be done, organizing. And I've just been reading your site, and let me, let me share a little bit of that. The problem is big, but there's an easy solution. All politics is local. We've forgotten that it's a time to go local. Your police, sheriff, city council, they all took an oath to protect your rights. It's time to hold them to it. We've been fighting this battle for almost 2 years. Now we've created the tools for you to do it too. I mean, this will be up in the Free American here, and it echoes what I've told people. When I had Sheriff Mack on talking about the sheriff's your highest law enforcement, and if you're sheriff,
the sheriff in Colorado is the highest law enforcement.
what's that? You kind of broke up there. Sorry. Go ahead. Repeat that.
I said, and the sheriffs in Colorado and Washington are literally your highest law enforcement.
Yes. I get it.
That was a joke grenade. You weren't supposed to get it for a few seconds.
I got it. Hey, I'm the guy that stopped the war in Vietnam. I helped stop the war in Vietnam, selling peace symbols to all the head shops and Spencer's Gifts and Kmart's. Those peace on the flag kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
This, Dan, I'm really happy to have you on. If you I'll have this up on YouTube. I'll have this up on Facebook. I'll have this up on Blog Talk Radio and Free American site. And it's again, it's not where this is. There's nothing to be afraid of, folks. There is no point in history. I don't believe anybody can give me a point in history when it was easy to be free. And what our founding fathers have, the wisdom and the intelligence of our founding fathers astounds me from day to day. I mean, Thomas Jefferson told you, if you ever allow a private bank to issue your money, the banks and the corporations that spring up around them will leave your children homeless in the land we conquer. We got 1 million Americans homeless, and I'm starting to think that this is the reason they built these FEMA camps. Oh, you're homeless? They're trying to kick the homeless out. They're living in tunnels under Las Vegas. They're living in drainage ditches in New York City. And, oh, now we can put you in a little FEMA camp, and, it ain't exactly like a concentration camp, because you can get out for 2 hours a day, if you take our bus. Again, this is, why are we doing that rather than providing them with jobs? How come we got so many homeless veterans on the streets now? Isn't the Veterans Administration trying to do anything for our veterans? Or are they just afraid of them?
Government is a dangerous servant and a fearful master. It does not care about you. Fire doesn't care about you. Fire can be used for good things and fire can be used for bad, but fire doesn't care if it burns you. The government doesn't care if it burns you. The government's worse than fire, because the government has very rare uses, and yet the government is intent on burning anyone who disagrees with it, and burning everyone it considers useless. The government has no interest except its own. And when you look at whatever statistic, whether you look at income inequality, whether you look at veterans on the streets, so you look at the amount of homeless, you look at war on drugs, you look at whatever instance you look at, you see a government that does not care about people, and when others point out how little it cares about others, how little it cares about people who get caught in fist, it crushes dissent. Every government throughout history has done that, and you're right, it's not easy to stand up and fight. It's not easy to resist. But yes, and yes, we may lose. If we resist, we may lose. But if we don't resist, we will surely lose.
In this issue of the Free American, the January 15th issue, I'm running a few days behind. I'm glad I did, because I intend to put all of the information from PANDA, how people can take this to your city council, to your county meetings, and bring it up. I mean, if you, the way they work, if you don't say anything, if you don't protest, if you don't raise your voice, then you're counted as agreeing with them. And they were in Socorro, New Mexico. I lived just outside of Socorro, had a little half a town in Socorro, and they were going to zone our whole area. Now, this is one of the tools that they're using is this Agenda 21. They're trying to eliminate the farms. They're trying to drive people into the city. They're trying to stop their living in the wilderness. And one of the things that I'm working with right now is the Noah's Ark project. And this gentleman is building really luxury homes, kind of a luxury home. I think it could be done on a smaller scale than he envisions. But he's talking about 3-story homes with a garden on the roof, solar on the roof, water tanks for gathering rainwater in the basement, and not connected to any electrical lines, not connected to any water lines, not connected to any city, state, or county regulations. Totally independent homes, and he sees that expanding into totally independent villages. I think it's a worthwhile project because he wants to use veterans to build them. Veterans for label, and we're talking about homes that are secure enough to withstand earthquakes, to withstand tornadoes or hurricanes if you're in a coastal area. The gentleman's been building, Noah West has been building homes for 30 years, and he's got about 130 patents on this, and he wants to do it for the good of the people. And I've said, you know, Obama's way of greening America is to sell the top of that mountain to some Chinese firm that's going to bring a bunch of windmills in. They're going to send all the power down the mountain to the power company, sell it to the power company, and the power company is going to raise your rates in order to provide you with this green power. But if you put a windmill on your roof and you put solar on your roof, you don't have to have the energy piped in. And again, when I came up with that whole concept 10 years ago, that's when my accident was arranged. Go ahead.
The real issue with stuff like that, and the real problem that people face when they try to go down that path of self-sufficiency, of independence, as one would say, off the grid. The real issue with things like that is the very reason that as an organization, we don't just educate people and get them, you know, if they come to you and try to take your child, you have every right to use whatever lawful force necessary to stop that. Obviously, we could go around and say that. We could go around and say that you can't do that, or that you can do that. We could go around and try to educate people to stand up themselves and resist were their child or their family or themselves to be attempted to be detained by the federal government under the NDAA, under the laws of war. But the reason we don't is unless you have a huge exodus of people from government, because government is viewed as the collective consciousness. Government is viewed as the ultimate protector of the rights of the people, the ultimate opinion of the people. That's what government is viewed as, the ultimate opinion of the people. And so unless you have a huge exodus of people who, let's say, stop paying taxes, a huge exodus of people, half the country stops paying taxes, then the government can't do anything about it. However, if you have 1 or 2 or 10 or 1,000 or 100,000 people, individuals, little by little start pulling their faith from the government, when the government goes after the individual, the community does not respond. The community kind of backs away from that individual and lets the government go after them. But if you have a local government of 10, 20, 30,000 people say, no, we're not going to allow this, now is the government going to go arrest the mayor? Not really. Is the government going to go, after the police department? Of course not. That is a large enough segment of people all at once pulling their consent from the government. But if you have these independent, self-sufficient, off-the-grid type of people, you've already know it yourself. Look, the cops come in, they smash the tomatoes, they destroy the farm, they hurt the people. However, if you have communities, entire cities, entire counties, pull their consent, and as the governmental structure pulls its consent, it's very difficult for the federal government to turn on itself, to turn on another governmental entity, to turn on a state or a local government. And you have that amount of people pull their consent at once, you have a much better and much easier likelihood of that succeeding than if you just have a few people, little at a time, pull their consent, because then the government can consider them loose cannons, pull them in, and crush them as they do so, and no one will bat an eye. They do that to a local government, people will pay attention, people will pay a lot of attention. And that's why although I really encourage people to try, I don't think individuals pulling their consent works. I think governments, little governments, small governmental bodies pulling their consent does work, because will the government go after, will the federal government start a firefight with the local police department? not usually, and most of the time, because the amount of publicity, dangerous publicity that would give the federal government from even just the local media, even national media focus on the federal government, all the local media would be so ticked off, the local citizens would be ticked off, they'd lose a lot of support, a lot of consent from every citizen in that area. So the only flaw I view with that is you don't have a large enough segment of people all at once pulling themselves from the system. That's the only way you protect this type of change, and that's why radical change doesn't work, because the state just sends armed force after radical change crushes the radical change. But if you get enough people to pull their consent, little by little, you get enough people at once to pull their consent, there's a lot less chance of getting crushed like a small little rebellion, and a lot more chance of being ignored for a while, and then unfortunately for the federal government, and very fortunately for the people, being accepted after a point when the federal government can no longer actually do anything, actually ignore.
Well, it's interesting. That's one of the things that I came up with for my Liberty Villages concept was all these neighborhoods were built on self-sufficient family farms or ranches. Why not just get out and talk with your neighbors and say, look, let's try an experiment in this block, in this one block here in the middle of Houston, in the middle of Austin, in the middle of Philadelphia. We want to do an experiment. We want to grow food in the backyard, not grass, and we want to generate our own power. We want to put up solar on the roof. We'll help you. We'll see if we can help you do this inexpensively, so you can save money. We'll show you how to insulate your houses so you're not wasting electricity. And all that would take is putting a flyer out and saying, you know, in the process, we're going to oppose this NDAA. Here's the danger. Here's what's happening. Here's what they've done. This is why we have to work together. And let's work together as a neighborhood. Let's work together as a block watch. Let's work together as a neighborhood watch. Let's put it together that way. And then suddenly you're starting to talk to people. I mean, I'm guilty of this. I lived in Miami, nice house on the canal, and I didn't know any of my neighbors. I might have met two of my neighbors. I didn't go out and talk to anybody, and that's one of the things. One of the actual drawbacks of the internet is a form of isolation. And I think this is the way we overcome it. Take a flyer out. Make a flyer about the NDAA. Make a flyer for PANDA. And go out and hand it to your neighbors and say, look, what are you doing next Saturday? Can we have a neighborhood meeting? Is that a reasonable expectation? Could we do that?
It absolutely is. And what I always advise people is to, instead of just taking it to neighbors, because historically about 3% has affected American politics in the first place, just 3% of people, is to go to already established political groups. Go to your local Tea Party. Go to your local Occupy movement. Go to your local political discussion group. Go to your local, even after a while, go to your local Democrat and Republican parties. And talk to them. Go to your local Libertarian Party. Talk to them about the issues. Talk to them about how important the NDAA is to stop. And get them engaged, because they're the political powerhouses in your community. They're the people who can swing weight. And you get them on your side, and you're able to swing a lot of weight in your community. Obviously, if you want to educate, it doesn't hurt to educate your neighbors. But if you're focusing on the 80-20 rule, like this, 80-20 rule is 80% of the time, the 20% of people who will, because the 20% of people who will do 80% of the work. And you take that to your local political organizations, to your local political groups. We don't need the entire country to have any idea what's going on. We don't even need half the country to have any idea what's going on. It took 3% in the American Revolution. Why can't it take 3%? That's it. Go to your local political organizations, go to your local political groups, talk about how dangerous this issue is, then get them to go with you to a local city council meeting. If anybody wants, we have a packet online at pandaunite.org/takeback. That's pandaunite.org/takeback. or you can go to PANDA.org and up and off right, there's a kickback link. There's a packet there that has all kinds of information in it, step-by-step process, how to take back your city, how to stop the NDAA, how to create a city that is safe for activism, and how to create essentially an activism protection zone. And this is how you do it. You go to your local political organizations, get yourself a coalition, go to your local government, get them to pass a resolution, go to your law enforcement, get them to back it, and set up a neighborhood watch in the area, and make sure everyone's on the same page. And this is exactly how you do it. Local government by local government, pulling their consent from this law. I don't think we're going to get Congress to stop passing these laws. I think they're bought, sold, and paid for, and sold to the highest bidder. In fact, they have their own stock market for congressmen. However, if they pass a law and it can't be enforced, they can pass all the laws they want. Any paper on black ink and white paper, I don't care. Whatever they want to pass. If it's never enforced, it doesn't matter. And that's exactly what we're doing, is we're pulling the bricks, we're helping people. We don't do it because this revolution, this country, will not be saved, will not be won by organizations. It will be won by people. It will be won by individuals. Organizations are centers of power. And the more power you get in an organization, this is why we decentralize in October, the more power you get in an organization, the more corrupt the organization has a chance, and a very strong chance of becoming. But it will be saved by people. And we help people do that in city after city, town after town, state after state, and eventually the nation to take it back to protecting the rights of the individual. And you know, I find that kind of interesting because today is Martin Luther King Day. And being Martin Luther King Day gives us a chance to look back on this man, and look back on this great man and what he did, and how he showed that the power of the people removing their consent from government action works. And how he showed that a national movement of people who decide that the government has stepped outside its boundaries can force the government back inside those boundaries by massive action, by massive demonstrations, even by a small segment of the populace. And eventually, through persistence, can win their civil rights. We have great respect for this man for great reasons. And today, being MLK Day, to look at what he did and to look at the way he was able to give people the tools to stop institutionalized racism, institutionalized segregation in their community, then that is the way we can follow in our communities. Start at the local level. Start with your local organizations. Start with your local governments. And move up from there. But start with your community and create strong communities, create constitutional communities, backed by the local government, backed by local law enforcement. And then work on your law enforcement. Get the militarized guns out of there. You know, law enforcement, we're walking around the streets of billy clubs, it's a lot less violent criminals, it's a lot less crime. The law enforcement wasn't out there shooting everyone. You know, if the law enforcement arms up, guess who else arms up? Criminals. And little by little, start to create a world that I would want to bring a kid in, that I want to bring a child into, that I want to see the next generation grow up in. Little by little, we can help people, and people around this nation can create, individuals around this nation can create a world that Martin Luther King would be proud of, and that we can be proud of, that our communities can be proud of. And the federal government will be able to do a dang thing about it.
You've got, I'm just looking at your site, you've done a wonderful job on this. You've got your resources here. You've got the flyers, got color flyers, got recruitment cards, got the PANDA strategy, got black and white business cards. You know, I'm just about out of business cards, so that ought to work pretty well. Take a look at that. This is, you've done a great job here, Dan, and I really appreciate having you on and being able to jump in. I'll add links to all this on my Free American site, and you can go to click on your name on my website, and that'll you can download this show, pass it on. I think you're giving people a lot of hope, and you're doing something really constructive here in how we can oppose this by taking back our rights. I mean, it's you know, I'm a big proponent of the rights of an individual, and I appreciate what you're doing in that vein.
My only goal is to serve as an example to others so that others can do it as well. And if a 18-year-old, now 20, from Ohio can get involved with this and start what is now a national movement against the NDAA, and to now have 4 cities pass resolutions saying, no, we're not going to do it. We're not going to allow it, to have sheriffs, to have police chiefs saying, no, we're not going to allow this to happen in our city. If I can do it, anyone can, and we're ready to help anyone get started taking back their towns. But you know, there is a solution. And now, instead of being angry about it, now you can get off the couch and make the solution happen.
You've done a tremendous amount of work here, and this website is great. I love the business cards. You know, I was involved with a group up in Austin we got a few people in there who wanted to change things. They're basically trying to take it over, and they wanted to. Well, now, what can we call our what's the goals of our group? I said, well, the goals have been laid out for you for 200 years. It's called the Bill of Rights, and you've got the Bill of Rights on the back of these cards here. I love that.
How can you defend your rights, your civil liberties? How can you defend them if you don't know you have them?
That's right. And, you know, I've said this number 1 on our Bill of Rights, that protects you. I mean, it doesn't matter what religion you are, it don't matter if you want to, how you want to worship, or what, you know, you want to hug a tree, hey, I got a pair of tweezers here, you know, we can get those splinters out later. You know, you want to, whatever you want to do, however you want to worship, that's it. And you still got the right to assemble here and talk about it. So this, the way you put this together, PANDA, the way you put that together, any church, any race, anybody here in America can use this. I mean, I don't see anything for anyone to disagree unless they simply want you to be a slave. And they, in my opinion, they have refined the art of slavery to the point that the slaves don't know they're slaves. They don't know they're being enslaved. I can get my pickup and go get a beer. Watch, I'm not a slave.
Slavery requires more than physical chains. The best slavery requires psychological change and relies on psychological chains. If you take an elephant, a baby elephant, and you tie them with a chain to a pole, and every time they pull against that chain, it pulls them back, and every time they pull against that chain, it pulls them back, and every time they pull against that chain, it pulls them back. You can reduce that chain when the elephant's older to dental floss, and that elephant will not pull away from the pole. All it takes for that elephant to pull away, to realize it's no longer stuck to the pole. And the American people have yet to do that. But little by little they are. And we need to encourage it. We need to bring them out. Little by little, They pull away from this pole of fear. Why do they use the word terrorism? Terror. Terror is fear. Terror is extreme fear. Terrorists kill less people in America per year than couches do. Why go after terrorism? Because terror is fear. And when the government goes after terrorism, what they're doing is they're admitting they're ruling you by fear.
In my film True Face of FEMA, I made the comment that you've got more of a chance, or less of a chance, of being killed by a terrorist in America today than you do getting attacked by a great white in Phoenix. And this you're right. They want you to be afraid. You be very, very afraid. If you're afraid of something, you have you've lost your ability. You've lost your confidence. You've lost your ability to even think rationally. I mean, I get that a lot. I get women that say, "Oh, I can't go with you. I'm afraid to ride a motorcycle." And I had people after my accident. They asked me, "Well, aren't you afraid to ride, Clay?" I said, "You ever trip? You afraid to walk?" No, I'm not afraid to ride. And no, I'm not afraid to be killed by a terrorist. And no, I'm not afraid of our government. This is our government, not theirs. I'm not the rebel. You're not the rebel here. We're doing what we're supposed to be doing.
Rather die on my feet than live on my knees.
That's right. I mean, people really ought to be reading our founding fathers, reading what they've got to say. Read what Patrick Henry had to say, for God's sake, or even George Washington. I mean, they knew then and what we would be facing in the future.
Heck, read some more modern revolutionaries. Read what Gandhi had to say about peaceful revolution. Read what Martin Luther King Jr. had to say about peaceful revolution. Read what people in all manner of movements had to say about individual rights and peaceful revolution all around the world. And you see, even if, there's, even if you believe the founding fathers, they certainly had their faults. But read all manner of peaceful individual revolutions, and you'll see this common theme: individual rights, and here's what you need to fight for, here's what you need to stand for, here's what you need to say enough to as people. Because if you don't, the government will infringe on them over and over and over and over and over again. And they'll incrementally, just like we've heard the term boiling frogs, they'll incrementally increase the heat on the American people. And then there will be, at one point, if the American people don't do what they're doing today, which is standing up, there will be a point where the heat becomes too much for them to bear. And that will be tyranny. That an NSA official, William Binney, a year ago, in an interview for Wired Threat Level, when he was talking about the NSA data center in Utah, said, "We're this close from turnkey tyranny." And we are. So you look at today, you look at what's happening today, you realize there are people resisting, and now there's a way. We've created a way, and other organizations are following our lead. Other movements are following our lead. They're creating their own packet. Common Ground Movement creating its own packet. Other movements are creating their own packet. And we're creating a way that every person in America can go to the local government and say, "I've had enough, and you need to honor your oath to protect the people." And it only takes a few citizens. Emmett, Idaho, took 80 people. Albany, New York, capital of New York, took 100. It only takes a few citizens saying, and get a community to say yes to the Bill of Rights.
I just saw Chuck Smith come up, and he's been promoting PANDA. and that's how I met you, through him. It's he's done some great videos out there. He's been speaking out and promoting what you're doing here. So it's the amount of people, the number of people out there that are really trying to do something seems to me to be growing exponentially.
Absolutely. And I will say one warning, and this kind of goes outside the scope of PANDA a little bit, but I will say one warning about what is happening today is the only way we're going to do this is just like the tortoise and the hare. We're going to have to be the tortoise. We cannot be the hare. We cannot go for a one catch-all solution, because the one catch-all solutions are designed to entrap people who do not have the patience for a real revolution. What has happened in Egypt? In Egypt, they rose up. They threw out Mubarak. They went to the top. They tried to stop the top from taking power. What happened? They got another dictator, Morsi. Now what happened? They rose up. They threw out Morsi. They are going after the Muslim Brotherhood. But now what? They have al-Sisi, another dictator. They have refused. They have fallen for the trap of needing to do something now, and getting it all done now in one quick, swift protest, in one swift sweep. Getting it all done now. Revolutions are a process. Revolutions happen little by little, and traps are set for people who want a quick fix. The Convention of States is a trap set for people who want a fix. People who are willing to give, to stop the federal government. They're willing to give their state governments the power to trample on their own constitution. Quick fixes will ruin a real resistance. And for all your listeners out there, look into and be very wary of quick fixes. I'll say it now. Be very wary of Operation American Spring coming up.
I have information up about that, but I was on one of their little chat rooms and made a couple of comments that I've got information about them up on my site, and suddenly I was kicked out of the chat room. And that raises my suspicions right there.
Quick fix solutions should always raise your suspicions. Be wary of the Convention of States. I mean, I published, or I commented on it a little bit. I've commented on it a little bit in the past. The Convention of States is dangerous. The idea of a convention that will now fix all of our problems, and our state legislatures are not corrupt. Of course not. We're just going to give them power. You give politicians power, they will abuse it. And just warning for everyone out there, it's not going to be an easy process. This is going to be a slow process. The American Revolution took 30 years to come about. 30 years. It's not going to be a quick process if you're going to do it right. If you're going to do it wrong, if you wanted to send us into from turnkey tyranny into absolute utter police state tyranny, like they have in China, where you dissent at all, and the police and the Chinese Stasi show up at your house and drag you into a room and interrogate you. You want to have a world like that in America? You go for a quick fix. What is one of the pillars of communism? Violent revolution. You want to go for a quick fix, go for a violent revolution. You want to go for a quick fix, go for a Convention of States, go for an operation, go for a quick fix, and the revolution will be crippled and you will lose. It takes patience. It takes a bigger man to be patient and put down the gun than it takes to pick up the gun. Nonviolent, peaceful revolution is the only way that this is going to be changed, and this country is going to be fixed.
That's you think this Operation American Spring is being contrived to set us against the police, set the police against the veterans? I mean, the last time the veterans marched on Washington, MacArthur came in and burnt their tents down and ran them out. I mean, made it into a conflict. You see Operation Spring doing something like that?
It may. I haven't looked as much into it as I probably need to, but I don't know. But I would say that Operation American Spring is an example, even if it's not necessarily dangerous. I mean, there's a very strong possibility of very, very armed people there, and shots being fired, and that being used as an excuse to implement things like the National Defense Authorization Act, and give them the public excuse to do so. Considering the fact that there's a lot of militias out there who put out the call to be there, and but it's a quick fix. It's saying we want the president out. Well, what's getting the president out going to do to you? What about Congress? What about the judicial branch? What about your state legislatures? What about your local government? See, the corruption seeps all the way through this country. At the very least, Operation American Spring is a distraction. It's going to the federal buildings. It's saying, what it's saying by congregating in D.C. is it's saying there's going to be a federal solution to this problem, which there's not. And at the very worst, it's a chance that the federal government could use to put call provocateurs in the audience and use as an excuse, just like Kokesh's armed march on D.C. would have been, used as an excuse to implement things like the National Defense Authorization Act and to defend NSA spying and defend things like that to, when as Gene Sharp put it in From Dictatorship to Democracy, when people rise up against their government in armed revolution, I guarantee you there's people going to American Spring who are okay with an armed revolution. When people rise up against their government in armed revolution, the American Revolution was a very, very, very unique exception. Usually what happens is it evokes a crackdown from the regime. And I see that as Operation American Spring, personally, this is just me, but I see that as a quick fix. So at the very least, a distraction. At the very worst, an example that the government can use to crack down on the American people.
What about Ron Paul? Now, I've met Ron Paul. He's been on my show before. Until recently, I even put him on the cover of my magazine back when he was running for president. And his people wouldn't even let him talk to me. Wouldn't let him see the magazine. And he is now retired. He said he'd been silenced. He was muted. Now he's not muted. And he's talking about auditing the Fed, which is, I suppose that's a good idea. I'd prefer to see him just eliminate it, because under the Constitution, we don't need the Fed. Government can issue their own money. We don't have to borrow money. I have a real problem with the whole thing, just like because Thomas Jefferson warned us about it. What about Ron Paul? What's your take on him?
Well, he's been in politics. One of the greatest pieces of advice I've ever been given. And I spoke at Paul Fest. I was the opening speaker for Paul Fest in 2012. But one of the greatest pieces of advice I was ever given, all politicians are animals. They will do, eventually, what their electorate wants them to do. And he's been exposed to a lot of power over his years. Now, in Congress, he has, without a doubt, been the most constitutional congressman in Congress. No question. Dr. No. And no question that I still have a very good amount of respect for the man. But just like any politician, or anyone who's been in politics, you can't trust what they say. You must verify. And I think Ron Paul is much more trustworthy than most. He made an endorsement recently of Attorney General Ken Cuccinelli running for office in Virginia. And Attorney General Ken Cuccinelli was the man who refused to defend his state's bill against the NDAA. His state's bill didn't do anything, but it did voice dissent, and he refused to defend that in the Republican National Convention, instead allowing a resolution to put the NDAA in the Republican National Platform to just be destroyed on the floor. Governor Bob McDonnell is his best buddy, and Ron Paul endorsed him for Attorney General. So, and other endorsements he's made, Paul Brown, a couple others that I'm not seeing as very useful. But you look at the and very very nice to our movement, very respectful to us. Daphne Lee, our state campaign coordinator, he brought her on the show, the Ron Paul channel, and he celebrated her victory, pointed people to the website. Think that he's done a lot of good, and arguably he has done more to awaken the public to what's going on than any other sitting politician on the face of the earth. But still a politician, and I put him. I just place every politician in the same category, regardless of who they've been and what they've done. Put every politician in the same category. I don't trust them, but I'm willing to work with them. And I haven't met Ron Paul personally. I'd love to at one point, but can't just trust what they say. You got to trust to verify, and I found that to be the case with every single politician, every single person who's been in public office. Hopefully now that Ron has kind of moved away from running for politics and being in public office, he kind of gets away from that type of pressure. But pressure is going to be there the rest of his life, at least a little bit, and it's always important to keep the people we like, keep their feet to the fire. John McCain, he's not going to change. Nancy Pelosi, she's not going to change. People like that, Lindsey Graham, they're not going to change. Kelly Ayotte, not going to change. People like Rand Paul are already changed. But people like Justin Amash, they keep their feet to the fire. Keep the feet to the fire of the people you like. If you don't keep the feet to the fire of the people you like, then how are you, what kind of peer pressure do they have? The only peer pressure they have coming to them, if you don't keep their feet to the fire, is peer pressure from people who want them to change. And that would be my overall opinion of any politician, including Ron Paul.
All right, Dan Johnson, Panda, I appreciate you being on my show. You're welcome back anytime. I will get more information than I've got about Panda up on my website now that I've had you on. Got to meet you and talk to you. And any way I can help, I'll be glad to do that.
Yeah, just if you want to send me a quick email, I'd love to have you on the Take Back Coalition and helping people in Texas take back their cities and their towns. Thank you so much for having me on the show. If anyone wants to, our goal as an organization is to help people take back their towns, take back their cities. If anybody wants to, you can go to pandaunite.org/takeback. Takeback. If you support the movement, if you like what we're doing here, like we're doing on this radio show, if you look through the website, like what we're doing, giving $5, $10, $25 helps keep this thing alive. You can go to pandaunite.org, hit the donate button, and do that. Other than that, our goal is to stop the NDAA and help people take back their cities.
All right.
County to town, city to town across America. Thank you.
Dan, what's your email? I can send you.
Yeah, my email is dan@pandaunite.org.
All right, sir. All right, I'll put you on my email list, and you should, if you can put this show up on your site somewhere, I'd appreciate it, and I think everybody else will too. You're one heck of a guest, man. I really appreciate you and your efforts and what you're doing. God bless you, and thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Have a great afternoon.
You too. Bye-bye now.